typically in a environment that's Indian philosophy, or in the tradition of yoga in Indian philosophy, would be seated, but we'll use the chairs. So I'm not a purist.
Otherwise,
So,
you'll have to help me out here.
So
Brace each other.
I light this candle in the spirit of learning and openness for all of us. And in the tradition of Indian philosophy and yoga, we take our hands to our hearts, a sense of our center, our sense of spirit of learning we all share, the spirit of openness. So we'll also offer the traditional sound of Om, which in this sense will make it mean a sense of opening, or what might be new for you, or maybe something you've already heard and maybe in a new way, or open to hearing in a new way, and open to each other, to this experience. So the sound of Om sometimes is spelled O-H, is spelled O-H-M, and sometimes people say it Om, but the way Sanskrit works, it actually is Om, like O-M. So it goes like this. I'll do it once, and then we'll all sing it together 2 more times. It goes Om. So you can relax your face and gently have your eyes half open, half closed. And together, take a nice breath in. Once more together. Please fold your forehead, a sense of a bow, as if toward your heart. Together, let us bow to that spirit of learning and openness. Keep your eyes softly closed for a moment while you take your hands back to your lap. And gently lift your chin and open your eyes. So, welcome. Thanks for coming. So I'm here to just teach you a little bit, or bring in some new shared learning with one another about the Bhagavad Gita and a certain topic within that keeps weaving itself through this beautiful text. It's called karma. In our there's a lot about karma we already know about and was already known before this text. But what I want to get into is the new concept of karma this text brings about, and then thus forth through Indian thought. And it has a little closer definition, might be more like choice, or the actions you take, like those beautiful hopes and dreams we just thought about, even how to create that, or how to get inspired or motivated to actually do the things we all hope and dream for, or work toward them. So first, I want to really have my notes over here. First, I want to ask you to think about a time in your life that I feel like maybe I want to sit down too with you. So, think about a time in your life that you were connected to a sense of just complete creative expression, I would say, or that sense of your dream being fulfilled. And maybe it involved other people and something you really worked toward that you felt you really accomplished, but it was really a sense of who you were. Like you just knew this was meant to be and something you had always dreamed of. In a way. So take a moment to think of that and close your eyes. Remember, I'll take you through a little guided meditation about that. So you may have many of these experiences, because none of us are 12, or you may just pick one and think of the people that you were with, the actions you took to help create this fulfilled dream. And the feeling that you had in that sense of being right in this day or this moment of kind of, what psychology might call self-realization, right? Okay, so you can gently open your eyes if they were closed. So one of the great teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, which I'll get back to what that is even, and is the concept of the things we did to create and the circumstances just that were there by luck, both, are in a sense all divine, all sacred. And also there's choices we made, and we had this beautiful inspiration that comes in this important philosophical text that there's a freedom and just a release of obligation in a way, a release and a freedom to create and to create our lives. But I kind of want to jump right to the point of it first, like the trailer first, because it's the most freeing part. We're now offered this wonderful new way of thinking and considering through these teachings that we can create our life, but in combination, in reality of our circumstance, in reality of our ancestors, our bad luck, our good luck, our environment, and our obligations, what we have to do. So it's not necessarily promoting go away and meditate on a mountain it's really a promotion of engagement with life. So, and I want to kind of dive in now to the story of it. So, does anybody, first of all, when we think of karma, a lot of us probably think of, this happens to us all the time, like the Cardinals baseball right now. My husband these stories always happen every day in our own houses, right? Of, oh, well, they left the toothpaste off. Things that people do, we kind of think, well, they're going to get they'll learn or they'll get payback. And that's a concept of karma that kind of existed before and through. It was already known and thought of before this turning point, in a sense, in Indian thought. And also, of course, it was already known, the concepts of the karmic turning and the wheels of life, birth and rebirth, what you had to do to secure your place in this karmic turning of life, and your past and where you fit into this, that was already kind of in place, in motion. And Krishna, the spiritual teacher in this text, doesn't deny that. Like that's probably happening. But there's also this in this other place that's kind of includes those. So back to the story. So in case you don't know, or maybe you already heard, once upon a time, just like Thomas and Rose, who's now offered for our children, once upon a time, there was a famous warrior named Arjuna. And he was the third born in his family. And he was called to become, after years and years of conflict, he was called to represent and be the leader of his clan. And there was basically, they were left without a choice. Like it became to the point where they had to face the other side in this war. So and there's more to that because it's inside of this gigantic story. Well, he chooses basically his he is a charioteer who's also called a bard. His name's Krishna, and these two people are the main characters. Krishna, turns out, is also his friend and his brother-in-law, and he becomes a very great teacher, and he becomes known. It gets revealed that he actually is the divine himself in his form of his friend and his charioteer. The charioteer in Indian war back then was also the person that was on to help them, and was also didn't have a side. So he was like the only person involved with wars that was a non-combatant. Mm-hmm. So they get to the edge. They're getting ready for this war, and there's an amazing reason for it. The other side had gone to the point where they were willing at any cost to, it's a horrible long story, but I mean it's amazing. But they get to this edge of the war, and Arjuna sees on the other side his very family, his cousins, his teachers, his ancestors, and he stops. He says, "Stop this charioteer. Wait a minute, I can't do this, and we shouldn't do this." And he lays down trembling. He's so scared, and he says, "I'm not doing this. I'm not going to war here." And so this whole text that then becomes famous, translated like hundreds and hundreds of times, takes place in a conversation at the line of the battlefield. So that's essentially, and it's a teaching primarily about the practices of how to be in making these choices in some ways, and how to live your life. And they call it yoga, but yoga then meant how to engage with and connect with everything, right? So doesn't have, right? They weren't doing yoga poses. So that's the little part of the story. I want to get back to some of the story in the background, but the biggest part is this terror that Arjuna was going through, and the crisis he has right at that dilemma. Like I cannot lead I know it's the right thing. I know we had to. There's no other choice. We had to go to this war, but I'm not going there. And he lays down. And Krishna says, surprisingly, this was kind of mind-blowing when I got into all the different interpretations. He says, surprisingly, why are you acting so stupid? Basically, what are you doing? How can you act this way? And actually, you're acting like a eunuch. So he calls him names, he teases him, but as we are offered from the great Indian scholars and teachers that have passed these stories down, that every character in the stories are us. And we have the opportunity to even consider what we do in that moment of complete fear. I mean, fear beyond probably the one that we've never known how to face, or maybe we have, maybe you have. But how do we get it together? How do we make a choice and act in a way you thought you were going to in the midst of fear? So it's totally a different meditation from the last one. It's more like take yourself into this time of complete crisis. What do you do? And what are your strategies? So we'll do that again. Just close your eyes for a moment and see if you can think of some strategies you've used when there's been a completely unexpected realization, completely scary, and you're trembling with fear. You want to give up. Okay, we can kind of release ourselves of that challenging memory for now. And if anybody would like to share what some strategies you use.
Well, the first thing I do is wake Thomas up.
Yes.
So he doesn't get a lot of sleep that way. But that's really symbolic of I reach out to my support system. Sometimes my daughters or my friends. So I reach out to others for support. So that would be one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to get through the night part till the morning, and then recover the sort of reasonableness of being able to enact a plan or look at choices.
That's what Arjuna did too. He actually, after being kind of kicked around a little bit by his friend, his teacher, he finally said, okay, teach me. What do I do? Tell me how to get out of this bind. Tell me what I should do. Help me. So I know, I wanted to ask Amy, she was gone when I got this, I wanted to ask Amy if you would read something, one of the verses. And I want to jump right into some of the advice that Krishna offers his friend. And there's two different, the cool thing about this text is there's so many different translations. I've used to make this presentation, I've used two of the most scholarly and the most directly translated to Sanskrit. There's so many beautiful Western ones that are also European and American that are more poetic and are just awesome. There's some in our library here too, I saw. So these ones are more translations directly Sanskrit. And I have this, and this gives an example of the two different versions. So this first one, right down here, if you could read that. Right there. So this is one of Krishna's advices to Arjuna. And so,
he whose wisdom is established casts off here in the world both good and evil actions. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga. Yoga is skill in action. Shall I read it again? I kind of want to.
Okay, sure.
He whose wisdom is established casts off here in the world both good and evil actions. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga. Yoga is skill in action.
Thank you. And then, Thomas, would you be willing to read the next one on top? So it's the same verse interpreted slightly more with more words.
Seek shelter in the single-mindedness. Pitiful are those who are motivated by fruits. Armed with a singleness of purpose, a man relinquishes here both good and evil karma. Therefore, yoke yourself to this application. This is the capacity to act. The enlightened, who are armed with this singleness of purpose, rid themselves of the fruits that follow upon acts, and set yourself free from the bondage of rebirth. Go on to a state of bliss. When you have the desire to cross over the quagmire or delusion, then you will become disenchanted with what is supposed to be revealed and the revealed itself. When your spirit of purposiveness stands unshaken at cross purposes with the revealed truth and immobile in concentration, then you will have achieved the application.
Thank you.
What's that last word?
Application. You'll
Application.
achieve the application.
Okay, thank you. And there are more verses from the first one that continue to elaborate on this concept and this great advice. One of the next ones is he who is without attachment on all sides, encountering this or that, pleasant or unpleasant, neither rejoicing or disliking, his wisdom stands firm. Okay, so those verses address a lot of contemplation. This could go on for like a whole series, a whole semester, just on those verses. So I just wanted to try to draw out a few aspects of that. One of them is, and it kind of relates here more to the strategy for dealing with fear and indecision. Trying to get clarity is basically what he's saying. Get clear. And then you'll be able to act with more skill. And he goes on to give more advice on how to get clear and release yourself of this quagmire of the pull toward your senses, because Arjuna here wants to, he's just completely victim to his senses, his terror. He can't think straight. So they really pull us into how do we get that sense of equanimity in the midst of chaos.
So in the reading that Amy had, when it said throws off good, does it say something like throws off good and evil action?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean lets go of the idea of good and evil actions? Is
Yeah.
Is that what I'm saying?
there's a sense of middle.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Stop
Right.
trying to judge your actions one way or another and be single-mindedness of your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you can just, I have copies for y'all because those are verses to really take in. You can meditate on them and take many different interpretations, which there have been many interpretations. And some of the teachers I work with have chapters just on those two verses. And one of the direct experiences of that section is Krishna teaching him about, reminding him about, remember, you already know. He's already in a family he's been trained as a yogi. He already knows meditation. He already knows how to. His friend's reminding him, hey, still your mind. You know how to do this. So he's reminding him in some other inspiring verses, which we'll go back to in a little bit. But I want to go to some of the background of what was going on then historically, and what karma and this meant at that point, and what he speaks to in so many different times in this Bhagavad Gita. And it comes out first in this initial conversation, the very beginning. It's more like a monologue from Krishna more than a conversation, because Arjuna doesn't say very much. He goes, yeah, yeah, what else? You know? Or maybe he says, well, why that? Why don't you show me that? And eventually Krishna does show him this cosmic display of his divine powers. He shows him, he shows him everybody in the universe that ever has been alive and dead, and cosmos, and it just blows his mind, and he goes, okay, I got it now. So, but before that, he basically details all numerous practices of meditation, of even he works with already known practices at that point, including Buddhism, and he kind of addresses and argues some of the other philosophies already known, and including some of the other Indian philosophies and some just esoteric ones that were around. He talks about eating practices, what do you do, what happens to the body after it dies, all these various topics. But our focus today is about choice. So I want to get into this, where it comes in the Bhagavad Gita, in this karma. Karma means, the root means core, or to act upon. So cur, or act upon, or stuff, anything that's already happened to us or will happen, these acts, is karma. The past, this whole set of our past experiences and ancestors, that's karma. And so it's so broad, but it's important because they speak to it so many times in these Indian texts. The Sanskrit doesn't want to get watered down. It just has different times it means different things, and it often keeps pointing to the sense of choice. Before the Bhagavad Gita, there's the act, what they keep referring to when you read, and I encourage you all to get a copy and read it, because it's amazing. It gets deeper and deeper. But there are these, the karma that was happening, or the acts before. Karma is kind of another term for just acts. They were called ritualists. And you had, right at the time of the Bhagavad Gita, there were these practices, cultural obligations that you had to go to help secure your place in the whole cosmos by going to possibly this holy person and pay to learn the ritual, or do it there, or do it in your house. It was possibly lighting fires and saying certain prayers. And people pretty much just had this connection, or this belief that when they did these rituals, that's what they called ritualists, that they would get, they had to, they were obligatory. And they also went so far as really personal pursuits. Like if they paid the holy person, they would get what they wanted. You know, like egoic things, like even and things they needed, like food and rain, but also things like just fun things. And they also had the obligation to meet the spiritual quota in a way. That's one way to put it. So Krishna starts to say, well, we don't really need those types of. He starts to even argue. Maybe we don't need to just do the obligatory acts out of just going through the motions. He starts speaking to this type of obligations called nitya, N-I-T-Y-A, and he says, well, let's put some meaning into it. And he starts to offer the encouragement that when you actually put meaning into these ritualistic acts, that's what it's all about. It's not just about going through the motions. So I have some contemplation questions, and one of this acting as a ritual, acting in a ritual or obligation. Another one example is what we already did here, and what we do often is lighting the candle, and it creates meaning. We set the intention, it creates meaning. But there are other times in our life, every day, that we go through routines and obligations and stuff we have to do that sometimes we have maybe it's not so meaningful in the moment. So, and we also have, those are common, but do we also have times that you do things because of your ancestral background or your family, maybe your religious background that you kind of don't want to do? Probably a lot of us here don't do those things anymore, but we maybe remember times that we kind of just went through the motions, or even go through obligations or activities that we think are going to get us something. And so all those are part of our life too, and we're part of their life back then. There's important work around it, because there has to be there's a kind of like the other side of not doing any of these activities or rituals, just kind of being in defiance or rebelling, was already kind of in the thought processes back then too. And Krishna argues against that as well. He says, well, maybe that's not really where it's at either, because I want to teach you, and I want to offer that you can still be in the world and do your obligations, do your life, but do it with a full presence. And that has carried over, of course, because
an example I just kind of thought of recently is graduation ceremony.
Oh, right.
And some people say, I've been to 100 graduation ceremonies, they're all the same, they're always boring, why should I even do that?
Right.
And other people say you have to do that. It's the only way you can honor this child's graduation and honor the people who are going through it. It's that same sort of tension about ritual that's expected.
Yeah.
Expected to go if you're part of the family, you're obligated to go.
Right.
Some people just go and they don't even listen and don't pay attention.
Right. I mean, how many, if we just went around, everybody would have one of these. Like, does anybody else want to throw out?
I do, because it struck me what you were saying. I went to an imaging center, and there were no windows in it, and the ceilings were low, and it was painted gray. There were some nice photographs, black and white photographs, but it was crowded with patients. And the secretaries were in a fury of ritual of, okay, highlight the papers, you sign here, this is what you pay, and they were doing this, and it was a very complicated, very uncomfortable place to be that offered no comfort. I sat down by some of the patients. I said, boy, we could really use a cup of coffee here. And they kind of laughed. That would sort of make it more pleasant for the patients, but it kind of broke the ice of people talking.
Right.
And then I went to, I have some physical therapy at another place, and they had windows. And they had a big bowl of candy on the counter, which I always look forward to. And the therapists intentionally make conversation with the patients, intentionally ask about your life and connect. And I've seen them do it with all the patients. And I feel good about the place. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it helps me feel good about my therapy. As two different places and two different, and listening to it, I thought, I'm going to write that other place, not with anger, but just explain my experience and ask them if they couldn't do something to make it better for the administrative staff and for the patients.
Great example. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was at a funeral this week too, and some of the obligation, of course, involved. How would it be if we just said, well, we're the third way that karma keeps coming up in the whole Bhagavad Gita, in all these teachings, and in this, is just don't act at all. Don't do it. And there's even wonderful verses that have been beautifully translated that if you don't act, it's like acting itself because it has its own consequence. So if you just say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to go, and then you'll see later on, that's where you get that common of the karma. It starts to play itself out. So, and this was taught several different times in this text. He says, well, I got it. I instead of doing this war, I think I'll just go to the mountains and meditate. That's a good idea. I know how to do this. And Krishna says, I'm sorry, dude, you're not cut out for this kind of lifestyle. You're a warrior. That's who you are. Live your dharma, your calling, what you're meant to do, and get clear. Get yourself together here. So, and how we're going to keep coming back to, well, how do I do that? How do I get myself clear? And he starts to remind him, he teaches him meditation. And, the other example I thought of is in marriage and in relationships, like in work relationships, with this sense of, I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to do it my way. And I'm not going to do it according to the rules or what I think I heard is a good idea, what we already agreed on. I'm just going to go outside our agreement and do it however I want. So, have you guys ever, I know you have, because it's who this group is, but does anybody want to share a time in their life they kind of rebelled against society or the cultural institution they were in then, and a time it may have worked out, or even a time it didn't work out so well?
There's a sentence in the Cornell Speaking Handbook for me. I was doing a hippie back in college, and I worked in the dining hall. I only had one pair of shoes. You work in the dining room, it's wet. So I was barefoot in places. Well, once I went to the lab, barefoot, I figured, this is my crossing the lab, what could happen? Well, the police came. And well, I managed to talk myself out of that situation, but some people get very upset by these rituals because you violate the people in authority's sense of propriety. Life can get a little bit more interesting in ways you may not want.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you get the ritual of our laws, and even the ritual of what our parents thought we needed to do growing up as teenagers. it has its own way of working out too, right? I mean, sometimes it has a growth in, and the times we completely disregard the set of cultural expectations which were going on in this era. And we're already kind of rising up as already historically in these, what were then known as Vedic times. And there were already groups of people that were kind of rising up in a way, again, coming outside of that norm of what needed to happen to keep your place in the spiritual context of these rituals. And but Krishna says, no, do the acts. But the result of what you think you want from the acts or from the activity, the ritual, is really not the key focus here. Try to consider that the whole pathway and the process, the ability to be completely engaged and inside that full-on presence that just takes you the time away, that's the better, or even is the result itself. And it even goes so far to say, when you're totally engaged in that kind of presence, full on with an activity, even so mundane as washing the dishes, an act you kind of have to do, then that becomes, there's nothing that wrong that can happen. All good can happen from there. It gives so much spiritual emphasis on that. That's where it carried down through the next 100 years, 200 years later in those Zen proverbs like chop wood, carry water, and even right now, the power of now. All kinds of teachings and inspirations between then and now about be present. That's where it's at. But it kind of weaves, I think it kind of weaves back toward that. Well, if you're just totally present and you forget about your past or your circumstance, then that's maybe missing some of the opportunity too to engage with what you have. But it has a lot of emphasis. It has the key emphasis there is on not being attached to the fruits. That's what keeps coming back. Don't be attached to these fruits of the actions, of the reward. And it comes back to here, in fact, the senses and this sense of delusion of the seesaw of getting something and losing it, happiness, sadness, pleasure, pain, and getting off that cycle of birth and death, which is what the scripture was talking about. Seek shelter in the single-mindedness. Pitiful are those who are motivated by fruits, armed with the single-mindedness of purpose. Here, the purpose of doing your thing, like washing the dishes. A man relinquishes here both good and evil karman. Like karman is the plural of all the stuff that comes with challenges. I think the enlightened who are armed with the singleness of purpose rid themselves of the fruits that follow the acts. Okay, it goes on, when he withdraws completely the senses from the objects of the senses. This classic Indian thought. They talk about the senses a lot. When you withdraw completely the senses from the objects of the senses, as a tortoise withdraws his limbs into its shell, his wisdom stands firm. And when he withdraws completely the senses from the objects of the senses, as a tortoise withdraws his limbs into its shell, his wisdom stands firm. And when the mind runs after the wandering senses, then it carries away one's understanding, as the wind carries away a ship on the waters. Therefore, O Arjuna, the wisdom of him whose senses are withdrawn from the objects of senses, that wisdom stands firm. So I would like to now just take you into an experience of that withdrawal from your senses and a sample of meditation. So if you could offer, even the traditional yogic style of emphasis on our posture as one of the key elements. So if you can sit at the edge of your seat, and you come back to the sense of firmness, our feet on the ground, your seat on the chair. In fact, take your hands back behind you and press your hands down to help lift your spine up. Keep the lift of your spine. Take your hands to your lap. And lift up a little higher. Slightly turn your forehead down. And close your eyes. Keep your posture as much as possible upright. Relax the muscles of your neck and shoulders. And turn your attention to your breath. Notice your inhale. Notice your exhale. Just let your breath happen naturally. Be aware of your breath as an inner anchor of your attention. You can come back to. Just notice how it feels through your nostrils. And as your breath rises and releases in your chest on its own, this is a few more minutes as a introduction or practice together in what's often called mindful meditation. Bringing your attention to the sense of your ability to notice the state within you that can notice. So with your breath awareness, notice the sounds around you. Just notice them as sound. If you have another thought that pops in or notice something else, just notice that, even name that as thought. Notice your breath. Notice the sense of your environment in the sense of touch beneath your feet, beneath your seat, the with your clothes, any sense of airflow against your skin. Just turn into this experience within you that can notice with your senses. And take 2 more minutes just to notice information through your senses and any thought or other internal experience you can simply name in its most general form. Let your breath be natural. And if you are uncomfortable, you can sit back and rest your back. We'll transition from this meditation as you keep your eyes closed if they're closed. Elongate your breath slightly. Gently open your eyes. And with your eyes open and your awareness on your breath, easily look around the room. And with that state of awareness, notice what you see, just as the objects, and notice the space between the objects. And close your eyes again for one more moment. Noticing sense of space between your thoughts even. And opening up again. So to finish up, I want to offer 2 more top parts of action, karmic yoga, that come in. We went through a few of them, one of which is acting in a time of stress, and the second one, acting out of ritual or obligation, or not, how that is. And sometimes, of course, those are important rituals to honor. And then acting by not acting. And now, the other one we mentioned were acting with a sense of full-on purpose, like complete meaning within the act as the fulfillment itself. The last two I want to offer contemplation on are making choices that connect you with your best abilities, your circumstances, and also include your obligations. That's the biggest, to me, what inspiration that could come out of all this. And that could be something to contemplate, as we did earlier. How can you things like, and I'm giving handouts that have this written out for you, like a worksheet, so feel free. How can you improve your attitude about your realistic and ambitious goals? Like what the cause of your actual goal, as taught in the Bhagavad Gita, is even just as important as the goal itself. Like, what's the motivation? One of the great teachings, like we just practiced, is that meditation not only steadies our mind and calms us, gets us clear in a state of anxiety, but also gets us a sense of serenity and then inner wisdom from which this intuitive knowing happens. And we've all, I think, experienced that we then are more clear on what we want to do with our lives, how we want to spend our time, who we want to spend it with. So would anybody like to share an experience that if they were in some kind of meditative experience, they were more able to, they realized they had some great realizations about their life, like being on retreat, right? Yeah, I think we all have. Who it is. So I want to give one more reading from the text, and then send you guys home with some more worksheets. And I have a bibliography about the books I've been using. So okay, so here are some readings that are like the summary in this text about the yoga of action. Your worth is only in the act, never in the fruits. Don't be motivated by the fruits of actions, but don't avoid actions purposefully. Pursue everyday tasks disinterestedly, for a person obtains the highest good when performing actions without self-interest. Though he has no reason at all to do anything or not to do anything, nor any motivation for personal self-gain, the wise person should perform actions. And those that always follow my advice, placing in their hearts rather than allowing their minds to waver, are freed from their karma. So, this great epic, the Mahabharata, is where this conversation takes place. And it's probably, could be anywhere between 400 BC and 400 Common Era. It's kind of unknown, way back. And it has 18 chapters. There's 3 main paths of spiritual teachings. This first one that's probably more embedded throughout the whole work is karma, or this path of action. The second one is knowledge. And the third one's bhakti, love, or devotion. And in between all that, Krishna keeps reminding us that there's this other element that helps gel all those together. You may know these things. You may know how you want to act in the whole teachings on knowledge. And you may know the actions you want to take. But maybe it's never really coming together. And then when you meditate or you open up and you pray on that divine sacredness and open up to that sense of grace, as it's mentioned, that's where that intercessor, the avatar that Krishna becomes in the story, is that elixir, the intercessor between what you want to do and what actually happens. And that bhakti, devotion, is part of that. It's also the devotion with that full-on passion, that just connection with others, that sharing, and all these are rich. And the bhakti is where the songs and these inspiring aspects of this whole work arise from. This text offers a new view